Hi friends, it's Shuba. Welcome back to my channel and another video. We've made it to the end of the year. Every single month since I started this booktube channel, I filmed a video wrapping up all of the books that I've read in that previous month and telling you my reviews. It feels like full circle because one of my first videos was a December reading wrap up, and here we are a year later. I have 13 books that I want to talk to you about that I read in the month of December. That seems like a lot of books for me even, and I think it's because I read a lot of audiobooks more so than I normally do. So I was constantly reading or listening to something throughout the month, which got me through my December TBR and got me reading more than I normally would. Grab your favorite beverage of choice. I'm drinking a coffee at 4 p.m. because it is New Year's Eve and I need to stay up until midnight. Enjoy. We are starting short and sweet with this review since this is a sequel in the Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig. This is Two Twisted Crowns. I absolutely love this book. I thought the first book, One Dark Window, was good, but this one was even better. I don't want to spoil this sequel, so I'm going to quickly talk about the first book and then we'll get into my thoughts. This is a story that takes place in the kingdom of Blunder. Blunder is infected by this mist, and if anyone gets interacted with this mist, they become infected with a disease or a power of some sort. Whoever is infected, they're basically forced to die. They're killed off. So we don't have this infection running around in the kingdom of Blunder. Our main character, her name is Elspeth. She is infected, but nobody knows. She has a monster inside of her head, and what she has to do is basically work with some people that she normally would not work with to try to free the kingdom of Blunder of this mist. And she's basically fighting time so that this monster doesn't consume her and the rest of the kingdom. It's very fascinating. What I love about this magic system is that there's tarot cards involved, and each card has a specific ability that if somebody has the card and they tap 3 times, they're able to use the card's ability. It's fascinating. I loved it. I've never read any other fantasy story like this. There is romance in this book as well, and I thought it was perfect. It was so good. The characters were all lovable, and in this story specifically, the second one, we get more points of views, and the points of views that I loved are from characters that I loved. I did not see any of this coming. I did not see myself loving the duology as much as everyone said they would. This was a very overhyped book, and it deserves all of the hype. 100% all of the hype. This has a unique magic system. The characters are likable. You have multiple points of views. It's hard for me to talk about the sequel without spoiling anything. So all I can say is that I recommend this story. Everyone should read it. If you like fantasy, you should read it. If you like unique magic systems, you should read it. If you like characters going on a journey of some sort to save humanity, you should read this book. I loved it a lot, and I'm so glad that I was pushed to read this. I did buddy read the first and second one with Chelsea, and I'm so glad that I did. We had such a good time, and it's always fun to buddy read with friends. So if there's anything you ever want to buddy read, let me know. I would love to. The Clinic by Kate Quinn. I picked this book randomly up, not knowing anything about this, from Barnes & Noble in August for my birthday, and I'm so glad that I did because this book was really fun. It's fast-paced. We have unreliable narrators. There's time jumps that happen as well, and you learn so much about our characters that you feel for them, but you don't know who you can trust. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Meg. She works at a casino, and she has a sister who is an actress. Her sister deals with alcoholism and drug abuse, so she goes to a rehabilitation center called the Clinic. However, the clinic isn't necessarily how it seems. Meg finds out from the news that Haley, her sister, died at the clinic. Might have been suicide. However, Meg does not necessarily think this is why. So what Meg does is she goes and admits herself into the clinic to try to figure out what happened to Haley and if Haley actually killed herself or if someone was out to get her. This book was wild. The chapters were super short, so every time you hit a new chapter, you change perspectives and point of view. So you're like, shoot, I need to keep reading so I can go back to that point of view, and then I go back to that point of view. And so it was really fun to read from these two characters' point of views. The second person that we read from is a girl who actually works in the clinic. So you get Meg's point of view, and then you also get another person's point of view who's within the clinic as well, who's seen it all. So you really don't know who you can trust. And I love a good, unreliable narrator story. The ending shocked me. Thinking back to it though, I should have seen it coming. I'm a terrible detective though. What do you want from me? I just read books. This was really fun and I highly recommend. Definitely check the trigger warnings though if you want to pick this book up. A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is an urban fantasy Hades and Persephone retelling, and it was pretty good. I wanted redemption after reading The Games Gods Play because I did not like that story at all, and this hit. This was really easy to read. It was fast paced. It was fun, fine, nothing amazing. It was ordinarily good. Let's talk about what this book is about. Our main character, her name is Persephone. She is the goddess of spring and she is Demeter's daughter. Persephone is finishing up college in New Athens and she's about to intern at this journalism place. Newspaper place? I'm like blanking on what these words are called. Anyway, Hades is the goddess of death and he owns a bunch of different nightclubs and casinos. And the deal with Hades is that he makes deals with mortals and the mortals always lose. And Hades basically owns these mortals. Persephone isn't allowed to interact with any god or goddess. Persephone is supposed to lay low. However, she goes to a nightclub. She meets Hades. She makes a deal with Hades and gambles with Hades and she loses. So now she has 6 months to bring life to the underworld or else Hades will own Persephone forever. This was fun. This was fine. I only say fine because I'm not sure I like an urban fantasy setting. It took away from the Greek mythology aspect of this retelling, and I love Greek mythology. I also don't think I've ever found an urban fantasy that I love. The other urban fantasies that I read was Crescent City, and I absolutely did not like that story at all. Kind of what The Games Gods Play too. Maybe this is a sign. What I did like about this is reading from Persephone's point of view as she went into the underworld and learned more about the underworld and learned more about Hades and what his deal really is. They slowly do start to fall in love. There's 1 or 2 spicy scenes. Honestly, I'm shocked because I thought there were going to be more spicy scenes in this story, but it was mild compared to what I thought it would be like. It was a fun time. I also do enjoy that the end of the story just kind of ended on a good note. I wasn't feeling forced to pick up the second book. I know that this is a book series, and I'm probably not going to pick up the second book. I just liked how it ended. I'm going to stop talking. I do have a vlog where I read The Clinic and this book, and you can watch for yourself. Old Enough by Haley Jakobson. I would not have picked this book up if not for the cover. It's just really fun. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Sav. She's in her sophomore year of college and she finally comes out as bisexual and she's ready to live her most authentic self as she should. She starts to make friends who are more like her and really accept who she is. She's starting to open herself up a little bit more and having crushes, and it's just so nice to see how we start off as Sav is not really secure with herself, But then by the end of the story, she just blossoms into this beautiful human being. This story is so emotional with so much heartache and heartbreak. Haley also finds out that one of her closest childhood friends is getting engaged, and she found out not by her childhood best friend, which in itself is really shocking. If somebody did that to me, if my best friend didn't tell me that she got engaged, I would be heartbroken. So we start to relive some of Sav's childhood as she starts to remember her time with her best friends and why they might not be best friends now. I think that this story is a perfect example of how people grow up, and sometimes it's okay to understand that who you were is not who you are now. Some friendships are okay to be left behind. And I say that in the nicest way because friendships are so important to me. In the story, we also deal with sexual assault, and Haley has to relive that experience as she's getting ready for this wedding. And it's utterly devastating. By the end of the story, there's so much growth. I said Haley, didn't I? I meant Sav. By the end of the story, there's so much growth with Sav, and this book is so short. It's 323 pages, but there's so much emotion that is put into this story, and I'm very glad that I read this book. This is a story about friendship and growing up and being proud of who you are and standing up for what you want and what you believe in. I see all of this in Sav, and I think that Sav would be such a good friend to have around. I really enjoyed her as a character. I will say though, reading through this, I did not have that same college experience. Growing up was very different for me than it was for Sav, so I couldn't necessarily connect with those pieces, but there is so much empathy that I have towards this book, towards our main character, towards what she's going through, and I think that everyone should read this book because it's small but very mighty. Also, don't forget to check the trigger warnings. Sisters by Daisy Johnson, I might be the minority here, but I did not like this book at all. It was very bizarre in not a very good way. This is a story about two sisters, July and September. I think they're a little over a year apart or 10 months apart. They're not too far apart. It doesn't say. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter. Their relationship is far from healthy, even though they're best friends. Something happens within the plot, and then the two sisters and their mom move into this abandoned house in the middle of nowhere that their aunt owns, and then weird psychological stuff starts to happen between these two sisters. We read from July's perspective, and September is the sister that is more of that mother figure to July, even though that there's a mother around, but the mother doesn't act like a mother, and so there's this void that September is trying to fill for July. I also don't like how the characters' names are months. It's confusing and weird. Anywho, as I read this very short story, I couldn't relate to the characters. I didn't really like our characters. I just wanted the story to finish. And then the ending of the story was kind of predictable, but I had no feelings. I didn't care for the ending. I mostly just didn't care for this entire book, and maybe that means that I should have not finished it, but I did because I'm trying to step outside of my comfort zone and read books that I normally wouldn't read. This is a book that I wouldn't have read if I didn't pick it up in Portland because the cover looks very weird. If you like Black Swan, then you might want to try picking this book up. I love Black Swan though, but I didn't like this book. Take that as you will. This review probably wasn't that great, but it was bizarre in not the best way. I don't think our characters were fleshed out well enough. I also don't think that Daisy Johnson's writing style is something that I enjoy. It's pretty abrupt, it's blunt, it's unpunctuation. I mean, there is punctuation, but I don't think there's quotes from what I remember reading in this. It was just weird vibes all around. Not my favorite. The Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante. This is my first book by Elena Ferrante, and I can't wait to pick up the first book in the Neapolitan Quartet. What a wild story. I love a good book about a female character who's slowly spiraling. I love a book about female rage. I love a book about unhinged behavior. You've heard me say all of this before. And this book gave super short, 200 pages of just sadness and aggression and of just going crazy. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Olga. She lives in a small town in Italy, and her husband decides to leave her after 15 plus years. She has 2 daughters, and now she's stuck in her apartment in the summer heat where she can't really go anywhere, spiraling, and it's wild. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed Elena Ferrante's writing style. I think that it's so compact, but also it's so detailed. I could picture Olga in my mind, and I could feel everything that she's feeling as she's basically losing control of who she is and her sense of self. What's really interesting about the story, though, is that it talks about motherhood and how while she was with her husband, she wasn't necessarily able to be herself. She wasn't necessarily able to go out into the world and just explore. But now, as she's leaving her home into society, she's just seen as this heathen because her husband left her and she lives in the small town. And it's so interesting to read from her inner monologue as she's dealing with all of this personally, but also how society is treating her. It's wild to me, and it's sad, but also chaotic, and it made me angry for Olga. Olga is not necessarily a likable character, I would say, but I think people think that because they think women are crazy when something like this happens. And I truly believe that Olga deserves to go crazy, okay? Her husband left her after 15 years. I'm not going to tell you why, but you can probably take some guesses. And now she's stuck with 2 children who, I have to say, in this story, are pretty insufferable. I could not stand those 2 children, but also they didn't necessarily have a father figure, and their mom was losing it a little bit. So I personally think that Olga had every right to go crazy, but why are we saying crazy? And I'm even saying it myself. You know, now I'm thinking more about this story, and nothing is wrong with Olga. Nothing at all is wrong with Olga, except for one thing that she did with one animal that I won't say. Check the trigger warnings of this story, but I really liked this book. A Far Wilder Magic by Allison Saft. This is a book that I was putting on the back burner for a very long time, and I told myself that if I wasn't going to read it in December, I needed to find a new home for it. And I did read this book in December, and it was okay. If you like Full Metal Alchemist, and you'll probably really enjoy this book because this is a fanfic retelling of Full Metal Alchemist, and I watched Full Metal Alchemist growing up, and I loved it. So I was excited to pick this book up. However, I feel like I was in a daze when I read this story, and I don't really remember what I read. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Margaret, and she's a sharpshooter. Once every so years, there's this hunt that happens where you can choose to compete in the hunt to hunt the hala, which is this deer thing, or at least that's what I thought in my head. It was this some sort of magical deer, and if you beat the competition, then you gain a reward. Margaret wants to be a part of this hunt to also make her mother happy, who kind of just ran away at some sort. She was on a mission to do something else, from what I remember. And so then she decides to compete with this guy named Weston, who is an alchemist. hence Full Metal Alchemist. So it's about Margaret and Weston. Weston goes to see Margaret's mom so that Margaret's mom could train Weston because Margaret's mom is an alchemist. However, Margaret's mom isn't there. So what happens is that they decide to work together to compete in the hunt. It was good. I remember the beginning of the story, and then I remember how the story ended, and I don't remember the competition in the middle at all. And maybe that just means that I didn't care for it. It was good at the time that I read it. I started reading the book and then I listened to the audiobook and went back and forth. And the more I think about it, I was underwhelmed. I went into this thinking I was really going to enjoy it, but I didn't. Also, this is a young adult fantasy, and I'm learning that I like adult fantasy more than young adult, unless it's Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, but Legendborn doesn't even really seem like young adult, so I'm not even going to put that in young adult, even though it is. So, this was okay. I read it. I'm gonna move on. The last physical book before we get into the audiobooks and the ebooks, Rouge by Mona Awad. I finished this book yesterday on December 30th, and I still am so unsure how I feel about this book. If you read Bunny, then you'll probably know why I feel this way, because Mona Awad's writing style and storytelling is just probably one of the most bizarro things I've ever read from. Okay, I had higher expectations going into the story because the premise sounds very interesting. This is about our main character. Her name is Belle Mirabelle. She's obsessed with skincare. Growing up, her mom would teach her how to cleanse her face, what the 10-step process is, how to keep your skin glowing and youthful forever. Mirabelle grew up watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I can relate because I have some favorite makeup YouTube artists that I still follow today. And so I was really looking forward to that connection as I read the synopsis. What ends up happening is that Belle's mom passes away unexpectedly, and now Belle has to go back to California for the funeral and to tie loose ends. At the funeral, there's this old creepy lady who shows up and says something weird to Mirabelle, saying something like, your mother went one with the roses, or something like that. And Belle is already weirded out by this. And it turns out that her mom was a part of this culty med spa that Mirabelle gets herself involved with, and things just get weird. Premise sounds very interesting, right? Like something that I would love to read. Skincare cult. Love that. It got very interesting, and then midway through the book, things were very strange. I feel like there was a lot of repetitiveness happening. The book probably could have been shorter. I didn't like the middle of it, especially when we were going back and forth, and I felt like every page was the same exact thing over and over again. Also, Mona Awad must be obsessed with Tom Cruise because he's mentioned on every other page of this book. And then the ending was good. Didn't see the ending coming until I did. Actually had a feeling, and then I was like, no, there's no way. But wait. It was weird. I'm still unsure how I feel about this book. I'm glad I read it. I'll probably read every Mona Awad book that she ever writes, but I just need to go in with no expectations because she takes us on this wild journey, for sure. I read 3 books on Kindle Unlimited. Let's really quickly talk about those because this video is getting long. The first one being Spark of the Everflame by Penn. This was good. There's a lot of hype for this series, and I always worry about Kindle Unlimited books that are said to be amazing because I go in with expectations and then I just am at a loss because I don't normally enjoy them. And this was fun. This is a story about our main character. Her name is Diem, and Diem is a healer living in a world where there are both mortals and descendants. Descendants are basically children of the mortals and the gods. At one point there was a war, gods came down, the gods won, gods and mortals fell in love with each other, and then they created the descendants, and then now the descendants just make more descendants, and the mortals are not really seen as very well off people. They are seen as peasants, as you might say. The world building is very interesting. There are 9 different realms in this world, and each realm has its own main descendant, and they have their own rules. It's pretty interesting. The writing style is really easy to follow. Diem is not necessarily a character that I can appreciate, but I can get past. I think that she's just very naive going into this first book, and I hope that there is growth that comes with her into the second book. A lot of people think she's very annoying, and she kind of is. I mean, she knows what she's getting herself into, but she's just not thinking, and I hope that we can get past that in book 2, because I am very interested in reading the second book in this saga. I really like this aspect of the world that we're in. I'm hoping that we learn more about it, especially when Diem starts to leave the realm that she's in and kind of explore a little bit more. The ending left me with a cliffhanger, which is why I need to pick up the second book. If you like romantasy, I think this is definitely a start. What I like about this story is there is a romance in this first book, but it's light, it's very subtle, and I like that this story has more of a fantasy world build, especially with the first book that it is, and with a world that's so big. I'm interested to see where we go. So I'm hoping to continue the story. Holiday Romance by Catherine Walsh and Snowed In by Catherine Walsh. I'm going to talk about both of these together. I do have a video where I read Holiday Romance, one of my favorite holiday books. It was so good. I loved it a lot. Snowed In, I loved it too. If you just like feel good, cozy holiday romances, then these books are going to be for you. The characters in our stories are written so well. They're funny, they're quirky. The banter that our main characters go back and forth with is just lovable. You love going on this holiday journey, and what I like about these stories is that they're not too holiday Christmassy, and so they're perfect for leading up to the holiday season, or even if you want to read them a little bit after the holiday season, they're still perfect. I also loved both of these books because they're interconnected standalones. You can read them separately if you want, but to get the full holiday romance giddiness that you would find, I do think that you should read the first book, Holiday Romance, before Snowed In. Holiday Romance is more of a friends to lovers storyline, which I absolutely love. I think you have to be friends with somebody before you can love them wholeheartedly. This is a story about 2 characters who are traveling back to Ireland for the holidays, and things go crazy with their travel plans, and they have to figure out how they can get back to Ireland to celebrate before Christmas. It was perfect. I loved everything about it. Snowed In, on the other hand, also takes place in Ireland with different characters, and it is a fake dating storyline, and I thought it was done really well too. Honestly, no notes. Both of these books were really cute. I personally just loved Holiday Romance more because I liked our characters in Holiday Romance more. Highly recommend. Read them next holiday season. I listened to 2 audiobooks in the month of December, the first one being Dinner for Vampires by Bethany Joy Lenz, and this audiobook was very eye-opening and unexpected. I'm not sure how many times I've watched One Tree Hill, but it is a yearly staple for me. It's my comfort show. I grew up idolizing Haley and Nathan. I grew up wishing that I had a Brooke Davis and a Peyton Sawyer. I hope that one day I would find my own Lucas Scott. That show is one of my favorites, and it was so fascinating listening to this audiobook because Bethany Joy Lenz narrates her own audiobook, so I highly recommend listening to it because for the entirety of her One Tree Hill career and even before, she was in a cult, and I had no idea. I mean, I did hear the rumors, but I don't know. There's a lot you can hear and read about on the internet, and you can't always believe what you read. Bethany was in a cult for 10 years, and this is about her life and how she grew up really religious and how she got into acting and how that cult shaped her decisions on One Tree Hill and how she's dealing with it now post being in a cult. It's very eye-opening. I know I mentioned this, but I don't rate audiobooks. However, this is probably one of the best audiobooks that I've listened to and read. I also think it's because it has a place in my heart from One Tree Hill, and I highly recommend. It's interesting, not just because you're learning about someone you kind of know or think you know, but it adds that cultish aspect to it, and that shit's crazy. The last book that I want to talk about is The Third Gilmore by Kelly Bishop. I listened to the audiobook and I highly recommend because Kelly does narrate this. Also, did you know that Kelly's name is actually Carol, but she had to change it for the SAG Awards? Crazy. There is so much I didn't know about one of my favorite Gilmore girls. This book was very interesting. We learned so much about how Kelly just became Kelly and who she is today. A lot of the story isn't even about Gilmore Girls, which I was wanting when I first started listening to the story, but I'm glad that it was only a little bit to her entire book that she wrote, because I have come to appreciate her more so than I did before. I rewatch Gilmore Girls every single year as well, just like One Tree Hill. And growing up, each year I come to appreciate Emily Gilmore more than I do the year before. So I'm excited to see how, after what I've read in The Third Gilmore, how I'm going to perceive Emily next year when I rewatch Gilmore Girls. It was really good. I do recommend taking a listen to it. I'm not rating this book, but probably one of my favorites as well. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of December. 13. That's a lot. I read a lot of really good books. I read a few that weren't necessarily my cup of tea, but that's just how life is sometimes. I'm not always going to find a book that I will love, and I think that's the beauty of reading. There's so many books out there, and there's always going to be something that someone will enjoy and will not. I can't wait to go into 2025 with that mindset. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching and letting me rant about the books that I read in December. I can't wait for the new year. I hope you all have had a really good holiday season, and this video will be the first video up in 2025. Have a great day. Bye.